for joining us and for agreeing to make this interview. My first question, the Dutch referendum, what do you see are legal consequences of it?
First of all, I'm always said that the new law on the referendum in the Netherlands, which established a relatively low threshold, only 300,000 signatures for the citizens' initiative that a certain issue becomes a subject of a referendum, was really the one that can lead to the abuse of the otherwise very good and positive institute of a referendum and a direct democracy. We have witnessed that just 32% of the Dutch people voted, sufficient for the referendum to be valid, but still only an advisory referendum, and with 61% saying no. In the statement with my colleagues, Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Brok, Rapporteur for Ukraine, Saryusz Wolski, and myself as the chair of the delegation, we were clear that we understood the message, but really of a part of the Dutch population. We need to engage more and explain to our public what are we doing in international affairs, what are we doing with Ukraine, but we need to look at the facts. It is now a problem that is most of all a problem for the Netherlands. The Dutch government, which was in favor of the ratification, which approved it at the government level, which approved it in two chambers of the Dutch parliament, has to come to all the EU partners now and explain what is their position. We consulted with them already in Strasbourg this week. I spoke to the Dutch minister. I think they need some time to analyze and to reflect how to address this issue. Even though it's a consultative referendum, it is a certain message, and we need to see how to find the best way that can keep everybody pleased, meaning that the agreement goes on with the provisional application, which nobody questions at this stage, but also how we can accommodate perhaps some of the concerns of the Dutch so that the agreement enters into force properly in its entirety.
If the Dutch are saying we should renegotiate the agreement, what is the position of the EU in this case?
We haven't heard that message yet. If it comes, we will have to consider it. I think it is very delicate generally to try to ex post define what are the problematic issues, especially if the same Dutch government and the mainstream parties have already stood behind the agreement and participated in its negotiations. It's a mixed agreement, meaning it has a union competence and it has member states competence.
That's what
So we need to see. I haven't heard that this is the position of the Netherlands formally yet.
That's my next question. So legal analysts are saying that the CFTA part will be in effect anyway. What do you think?
The DCFTA is provisionally applied. You know that the common commercial policy or the external commercial policy is the competence of the Union, and that is very important both for Ukraine and of course also the European economic operators. And I think that the provisional application, not only on that part but on many other parts of the agreement, will continue as it is today, and also the functioning of the Parliamentary Association Committee, which I co-chair, will continue as usual as it has been so far.
You said in this statement that 0.6% of the EU population cannot take the decision, and it was like you are pointing that this is a small minority. How do you evaluate the reaction of other stakeholders in the EU? Do they understand that this is probably the substitution of democratic principle?
As I said, the issues of this nature, which become a subject of a national referendum on the European issue with an international consequence, especially about the strategic choice and the decision and the orientation of another country, without the possibility for the actors from that country, in this case Ukraine, to fully participate in this process, it's utterly unfair. It's not correct. If it was Georgia, if it was Croatia, I'm sure that the result would have been the same. So this is not about Ukraine. This is the attempt of the certain anti-systemic, anti-European forces in the Netherlands who have used the Ukrainian association agreement with the EU as a subject and a token of making a problem to the Dutch government, making a problem to Europe. Look at the people who were the first one to congratulate to the no camp to Geert Wilders. It was Nigel Farage from UKIP, it was Marine Le Pen from Front National. So the only winners of this negative referendum are the extreme political forces in Europe, anti-European forces in Europe, and perhaps there is a pretty positive atmosphere in Moscow. So these are the ones who can consider the results of this referendum as something which is a success. For all the rest of us, and why did we as for instance my country as Croatia. Why didn't we choose a referendum way? Because we are convinced that the agreement of such a nature, of so many pages of technical documentation, is not a subject that is easily explained to the general public. It requires a lot of pre-knowledge about Europe, it requires a lot of legal knowledge, economic knowledge, so I don't think that issues like this should become a matter of a referendum. And therefore, we want our Dutch friends to come up with a suggestion of how to address the issue in the future.
Andrej, ahead of the referendum, there were a few statements about EU membership perspective of Ukraine. Mr. Juncker, the head of the European Commission, said that probably Ukraine will not join in 20-25 years. And then Mr. Rutte, Dutch Prime Minister, said that, well, he thinks that membership perspective will harm, that it will be not possible for Ukraine to be friendly relations with Russia and EU. And basically, he denied it altogether. What do you think about it?
I think that the same type of narratives of slowing down ambitions to become members are already established in the EU public sphere. My country also was discouraged many times not to apply, to wait, to see when the moment is the best. There are simple things on which the country should base its strategic decisions. They are based, first of all, on one's own ambitions, one's own courageous approach, and one's own strategic goal. Ukraine is a European country. Physically, it is in Europe. According to the treaty, Lisbon Treaty on the European Union, every European country has the right to apply for membership if it fulfills certain criteria, whether it's democracy, whether it's human rights, whether it's the rule of law, or the entire European acquis adoption, which is 120,000 pages of primary and secondary legislation. Process of adopting this acquis is a very complex one, it's a very delicate one. That's why the instruments such as association agreement exist. They are here to help a country to adapt its society, its legal framework to the standards of the European Union. For that, it takes time. So I think at this stage we need to be realistic. There is no real great positive mood for enlargement. Not talking about Ukraine, talking about my neighbors, countries of like Bosnia and Herzegovina, or Serbia, or Macedonia, or Albania, who are much closer, who are not covered by the neighborhood policy, but by the enlargement policy. So we need to be realistic. We need to help Ukraine perform the reforms. We need to very steadily, very calmly build the position that when the moment comes, the next stages will be addressed. Now we are in the phase of association, you are a victim of aggression, you have parts of your territory occupied. I think that the realistic approach is the best one. But the perspective is there and no one can deny it by a political statement. It exists in the treaties, and the most important thing is if it exists in the ambition of the leaders of Ukraine and the support of the people of Ukraine.
Andrej, maybe the last question. We are expecting the Commission's legislative proposal on visa-free regime, and after that there should be a decision by European Parliament and Council. So what do you expect? What decision do you expect?
You know that Ukraine had a serious conditionality approach to fulfill the requirements from the visa liberalization action plan. I think that the bulk of these conditions has been fulfilled. The last ones were the adoption of the law on the electronic declaration of assets, also the nomination of certain members of the boards of the Agency for Anti-Corruption. I think that the Commissioner Hahn, who will soon visit Ukraine, will be very clear in explaining when the Commission intends to formally submit the legislative proposal to the Council and to the Parliament. I can speak on behalf of the European Parliament. I think we will be very keen to act swiftly, both in the Committee of Foreign Affairs, which I'm Vice Chairman, but also in the main committee responsible for this issue, and that is the Committee for Civil Liberties, where the entire issues of immigration policy and visa policy are predominantly dealt. And I don't think that there is in any way any question that there will be a clear majority in the European Parliament for Ukraine to be included in the visa liberalization regime.
What about the member states? Can you comment on that?
I think that there is a general mood that if the Commission, who has been so closely monitoring the preparations of Ukraine for this process, is saying the conditions have been fulfilled, and if we look realistically, you are a country that is caring for 1.5 internally displaced persons. 1.5 million internally displaced persons. There is a serious number of refugees, but when we look at the requests, formal requests for the asylum in the members of the European Union, given the total number of requests, it's a very small number. You have demonstrated the internal solidarity of absorbing your own citizens, your own compatriots who fled from the war areas and stayed in Ukraine. So Ukraine did not pose to the European Union a migratory risk or of a big refugee or migration flow. That is another argument that is, in my view, very important, that the Ukrainian citizens are enabled to come to the EU member states without the visa requirements.
Thank you very much, Andrej. Thank you.
Thank you.